Something just happened in January 2026 that's going to reshape the entire global financial system.
And it didn't come from Washington, Wall Street, or the Federal Reserve.
It came from the BRICS alliance: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and now Saudi Arabia and Egypt.
They just flipped the switch on their new international currency system. They're calling it the unit. And as of right now, it's live and operational for cross-border trade settlements. This isn't coming soon. The unit is functioning right now as a real alternative payment system that allows these countries to conduct massive trade transactions without touching a single US dollar.
For your entire lifetime, the US dollar has been the undisputed king of global commerce.
Nearly everything bought, sold, or traded internationally was priced and settled in dollars. It was the only system that mattered, the only game worth playing.
What just fundamentally changed? BRICS didn't attack the old system, they built a completely separate one.
They created their own financial infrastructure, their own rails, their own settlement mechanism.
And they just opened it for business to nearly half the world's population.
They haven't destroyed the dollar-based system, at least not yet. But for the first time in 80 years, they've created a legitimate operational alternative, backed by the world's fastest-growing economies and largest populations. The era of the dollar having zero competition just ended. The monopoly is broken. So how did this unit actually function? What makes it different from just using existing currencies?
The design itself is the entire strategy, and it's brilliant in its simplicity.
It is built on two foundational pillars that address the two biggest concerns countries have about any new currency: stability and sovereignty.
First pillar, gold backing. A full 40% of the unit's value is pegged directly to physical gold held in secure vaults across BRICS nations.
This is actual physical metal that can be audited and verified.
This is their way of saying to the world, this currency is anchored to something real, something that has held value for 5,000 years.
Something the entire planet already trusts, regardless of politics. It's their credibility anchor.
And the other 60%, and this is where the strategy gets really sophisticated, is backed by a weighted basket of BRICS national currencies.
Chinese yuan, Indian rupee, Russian ruble, Brazilian real, South African rand.
This is their big bet on the future. This component says our combined economic power, our natural resources, our manufacturing capacity, our growing consumer markets, our combined GDP of over $28 trillion.
It's strong enough to support a global reserve currency, so the unit is engineered as 40% safety through ancient trusted gold, and 60% growth potential through the rising economic power of the developing world. Together, it's designed to be both stable and...
This isn't just a new payment method. This is a direct structural challenge to the way global money has functioned since Bretton Woods in 1944.
So why now? Why did these nations decide that January 2026 was the moment to launch their own monetary system?
What was the trigger? The answer is February 2022.
Money Russia had accumulated over decades and stored in Western banks. Hundreds of billions of dollars.
It demonstrated in the starkest possible terms that the entire global financial system, the architecture built on dollars, if your reserves are held in their system, they control your wealth. And if it could happen to Russia, a nuclear-armed G20 economy, it could happen to anyone.
Saudi Arabia watched,
China watched, India watched, Indonesia watched, Turkey watched, and they all thought the same thing: we're vulnerable.
Our national savings could be deleted overnight if we cross the wrong line.
Finding a plan B went from a quiet diplomatic discussion to an urgent national security priority. The unit is that plan B made operational.
It's not about starting a financial war with the West. It's about building a financial shield.
Contentious. They're constructing a parallel network where their trade, their reserves, their economic sovereignty cannot be frozen.
It's a direct response to a single powerful lesson. If you don't control the financial system you operate in, that system can be used to control you.
10 for this one, it's the best quality.
How about 7?
Look up there, the news is floating again.
Can countries really trade at scale without the dollar? The answer is demonstrably yes.
And we don't have to speculate, because we already have proof of concept operating at massive scale right now. Look at Russia and China.
Today, in January 2026, approximately 90% of bilateral trade between these two economic giants, but
This is the real-world beta test for everything the unit aims to accomplish on a global scale.
Russia and China didn't wait for some perfect system to be built. They needed to survey Western sanctions, so they pioneered the workarounds. Think of it this way: the unit is the new superhighway that BRICS just officially opened. Russia and China have been driving on the back roads and side streets for 4 years, successfully avoiding the dollar toll booths, proving the route works. Their 90% figure isn't a projection or a goal. It's current reality, verified by trade data. And it proves that dollar-free trade at scale isn't just theoretically possible, it's already happening between two of the world's largest economies. Let's talk about the scale of this launch, because scale is what transforms an interesting experiment into a genuine threat to the existing system.
This is not a fringe coalition of small economies trying to make noise.
Beloved, the BRICS alliance, now expanded to include major players like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt.
Nearly half of humanity. Approximately 46% of the global population now lives in BRICS member or partner nations.
That's over 3.6 billion people. Think about that number in practical terms.
Unit isn't launching into a theoretical future market. It has instant purpose and instant demand, because this massive block of nations can immediately begin using it to settle trade amongst themselves. Oil from Russia to India, electronics from China to Brazil, agricultural products from Brazil to China, manufactured goods from India to Egypt. All of this can now flow through unit-based settlement. This sheer scale of population, combined economic power of over $28 trillion in GDP.
Control over critical resources, oil, gas, rare earths, agricultural commodities, is what makes this move so historically significant.
It gives the project a gravitational pull and potential global impact that simply cannot be dismissed or ignored by Western financial authorities. And this directly impacts something you might already own: gold.
because the unit is 40% backed by physical gold, the success and expansion of this system creates massive structural demand.
They've been stacking gold for years. But if the unit gains serious adoption, if more countries join and more trade flows...
Series. It's straightforward supply and demand mathematics. You have massive, continuous institutional demand from BRICS central banks needing to back an
exorbitant privilege of the dollar.
Here's how it works in simple terms.
because virtually the entire world uses US dollars for international trade. And central banks hold dollars as reserves. The United States gets massive financial benefits that no other country enjoys.
The US can borrow money more easily and more cheaply than anyone else, because there's always global demand for dollar-denominated assets. America can run enormous trade deficits year after year, importing far more than it exports because other countries need to accumulate dollars to function in global trade.
And most critically, the US can use access to the dollar system as an incredibly powerful geopolitical weapon through sanctions, asset freezes.
The BRICS unit is a direct, calculated challenge to that entire arrangement. This isn't about the dollar collapsing next week or hyperinflation hitting next month.
That's not how this plays out. Instead, the unit puts America's free ride on a timer. It creates erosion, not explosion.
For the first time in modern history, there's a credible large-scale alternative system being built by major economies that offer.
Unit creates choice where previously there was monopoly.
And every time a country chooses to settle even a portion of their trade in units instead of dollars, it incrementally reduces.
If enough countries make that choice, even for just some of their transactions, it slowly but inexorably chips away at the exorbitant privilege.
The US isn't facing a sudden catastrophic crash.
What America faces is the very real beginning of a gradual, persistent erosion of its most powerful economic advantage.
And once that erosion starts and gains momentum, it's nearly impossible to reverse because the benefits of the alternative become self-reinforcing.
But here's what might be the most significant strategic implication.
The unit's impact on third-party nations. The countries that aren't in BRICS yet, but are watching very carefully.
Think about major developing economies: Indonesia, Nigeria, Turkey, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Vietnam.
Many of these nations are struggling with massive debts denominated in US dollars.
They're caught in currency traps where their local money depreciates, but their debt obligations stay in expensive dollars.
They're also frequently caught between competing geopolitical pressures from the US and China. For their leaders and central bankers, the BRICS unit isn't about ideological loyalty to China or Russia. The ability to diversify risk, a way to trade with major partners without being completely exposed to dollar volatility or Western foreign policy decisions. A potential escape route if they face sanctions or financial pressure.
Every time they watch the Federal Reserve make policy decisions that call chaos in their currency markets, the BRICS alternative becomes more attractive.
This is how a monetary shift becomes a geopolitical realignment. The unit acts like a gravitational force, pulling in nations that want more independence and financial sovereignty.
It won't replace the dollar for everyone overnight, but it begins to bifurcate the world into different financial spheres of influence.
The existence of the unit, functioning and operational, signals to the next wave of countries that joining is now a realistic option.
The system is built, tested, and ready for expansion.
That optionality is the real threat to dollar dominance.
Now we have to address the elephant in the room.
The biggest question mark and the most significant challenge to the long-term success of the unit.
For this system to not just launch, but actually thrive and grow over years and decades.
The BRICS nations need something that's extremely difficult to achieve: sustained trust, coordination, and unified. Let's be completely honest about the internal tensions. The BRICS alliance is a coalition of countries that have often been rivals, and in some cases have directly conflicting strategic interests. China and India, the two largest, their competition for regional influence in Asia is intense.
Russia and China present a united front against the West, but historically they've been rivals for Central Asian influence and have a complicated relationship.
Brazil's democratic government often has very different political values and priorities than Russia's authoritarian system.
South Africa's economy is tiny compared to China's and India's, creating asymmetry in influence and benefits.
Managing a shared currency system requires giving up significant amounts of individual monetary sovereignty and policy control.
That's an enormous ask for any proud, powerful nation. What happens during the inevitable economic crises? If one member country faces a severe recession or currency crisis, do the others bail them out?
Who decides monetary policy? Who controls the gold reserves? What if political relationships deteriorate between members?
These are the kinds of questions that tore apart previous monetary unions.
The European common currency, the euro, nearly collapsed during the Greek debt crisis, precisely because of these coordination problems.
And those were countries with much more shared history, values, and political integration than BRICS has.
The threat might be internal fracture, disagreement, and the simple difficulty of maintaining unity among diverse nations with competing interests over the long term. This is the vulnerability that Western analysts are counting on. The bet that BRICS will eventually fracture under the weight of its own contradictions. But here's the counter-argument that's important to consider. Shared opposition can be a powerful unifying force. The BRICS nations may have differences, but they share one overwhelming common interest: reducing dependency on a Western.
That shared motivation, driven by genuine security concerns after watching Russia get financially isolated, may be strong.
So, let's synthesize everything and arrive at the bottom line.
What's the final assessment of the BRICS unit going live in January 2026?
This is not the story of the US dollar dying next month.
That's a sensational headline designed for clicks, but it's not grounded in reality.
The launch of the unit is better understood as the starting gun for a long, slow-motion transformation of the global financial architecture.
UNIT's real victory isn't immediately replacing the dollar. Its success is simply existing and functioning as a credible working alternative. For 80 years since Bretton Woods, there was effectively no choice in reserve currencies and international settlement.
The dollar was it. Now there is a choice, and that changes everything.
You cannot defeat me! Your reign is over.
What this means in practical terms: the dollar's dominance will face steady, incremental pressure rather than a single catastrophic collapse. It means countries around the world suddenly have negotiating leverage they never possessed before.
When the US threatens sanctions, a country can now credibly respond, "We'll just shift more of our trade to the unit system."
That's a game changer in geopolitical negotiations.
The world isn't splitting cleanly into two separate financial blocks overnight. Instead, we're evolving into a much more
The BRICS unit has firmly planted its flag in this new multipolar landscape.
And once planted, it's very difficult to remove. The game has fundamentally changed.
The rules that govern global finance for your entire life are being rewritten in real time.
And whether you're an investor, a business owner, or just someone trying to protect your savings, understanding this shift isn't optional anymore.
It's essential. Because the world that emerges from this transformation will look very different from the one we've known. The era of unchallenged dollar supremacy is over. What comes next is anyone's guess, but ignoring it is no longer an option.